Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Candidates Tournament of 2024. This is a double round robin, 8-player event, and the winner will play for the World Chess Championship. We have the open candidates and the women's candidates happening at the exact same time for the first time in history. And this is round number 2 out of 14. Today there was an earthquake in New York City. Luckily it was not that big, but still it shook the house multiple times. And today there was an earthquake in Toronto. Both literally, maybe, I don't know, but also metaphorically, because today's games were absolutely unbelievable, and I am going to take you through every single one of them, as I always do. And today, Vidit Gujrathi's name is so long, it actually goes off the screen. That is a first. And that's because I added the scores. That is generally not part of their name, and I am showing you that they both have half out of 1 point. All right, here we go. Friendly reminder, for the next couple of days, all my courses 33% off, just to begin the candidates. Hikaru opens with e4. We have Hikaru versus Vidit Gujrathi in the first game, and then I will show you all the other games because they were all very, very fun. This one, a Spanish, all right? And Vidit Gujrathi here does not play the main line with a6, knight f6. He plays the Berlin. Excuse me. This opening was popularized in the year 2000 by Vladimir Kramnik in a world championship match against Garry Kasparov, and this is kind of the antidote to the Spanish, which is why Hikaru plays d3. This is very trendy nowadays. You do not allow the knight to take, but this is a very committal decision. I'm not going to bore you with all the intricacies and the details, but the Berlin was supposed to be the antidote to the Spanish. The anti-Berlin, which doesn't allow black to take this pawn, is the antidote to the Berlin. Bishop c5. Now Hikaru plays c3, controlling the center and preparing this move. Both sides castle. Vidit puts the pawn in the center because that's what you're supposed to do. We're going to see another game a little bit later where black plays this move d5, which is a slightly more aggressive way of playing this opening, and kind of shows you the way chess branches out into multiple variations as the game progresses. d6, h3, and at this point, Vidit rescinds the offer of allowing the knight to be captured and says, you know what, Hikaru, you waited long enough. Now this bishop will be a target for my pawns, and then I'll put the knight right here. All of this has been played before, which is why Hikaru in this position played the move pawn to d4, a very natural move. If black takes, white gets a very healthy center and a very comfortable advantage. The move d4 has been played some hundreds of times, and black here frequently will choose between taking, but generally retreating the bishop back to the b6 square. Which is why it must have been extremely surprising when Vidit went here, which is literally a move that has never been played before. This is what we call a novelty. It is a move that has literally, I mean, it might have been played in like random games at bars, but it literally has never been played before, ever. Ever. And the idea of this move is that if white takes and black takes and white takes another pawn, black will simply put the knights like this and then put the bishop like this, and this pawn, it's kind of a liability for white. White can't move the knight out. White struggles to move the bishop because of this, and in the future black will plant the knight here and attack. It's actually kind of a brilliant little move. So Hikaru thinks and plays bishop d3, spends 7 minutes, and Vidit also doesn't take. He loses a pawn in the center. What on earth is Vidit doing? Hikaru takes on e5. Another 20 minutes down the drain. Not down the drain, he's thinking, but that's a massive time investment. He takes, and he grabs the pawn on e5. He doesn't understand what is Vidit's idea. And Vidit, in this position, uncorks the haymaker! Bishop takes... What? He just completely lost the bishop. This was part of his preparation. Hikaru now thinks and plays knight c4. Now, the idea of this is that if white takes, black plays queen b8 and somehow is doing fine. What? What is happening? White can now play bishop f4, bishop c7, bring the bishop back, allow this to get captured and go here. And that is probably what Hikaru should have gone for, something like this. But this is still a very, very, very dangerous position. So instead of that, Hikaru plays knight c4. and he's emerged from the opening down 40 minutes on the clock. This is an unbelievable demonstration of preparation by Team Vidit. Bishop g4, and now Vidit is on his own. So he plays bishop c7. You'll notice he spent 30 minutes. Generally, that is a bad sign. And now Hikaru is probably back in the game. Hikaru finds this idea e5, right? The best move here for black was to play knight g6. Not worried that this bishop will get taken because you have a lot of activity, and black is slightly better because of all the preparation. But bishop c7 is what he played, and now Hikaru grabs himself a pawn on h7 and forces Vidit to move, and he's caught up on time. This is really bad for Vidit. Really, really bad. And now the best move for white is to play queen e4 and start fighting back. Black could play f5. White would play bishop takes f5. You can't take with anything or else queen takes here. So check on h4, bishop g5. I mean, this is almost impossible to generally play. And maybe white will liquidate things and potentially get out of dodge. But Hikaru comes back with the bishop. So you'll notice he spent another 20 minutes, and I think it was just a level of hesitation here, because now Vidit immediately pounces on the initiative again, and he's removing Hikaru's control of the center. Hikaru comes back, Vidit takes, and Hikaru must have felt like he needs to do something, like right now, like he's got to fight back. So he played this move quite quickly. He didn't take the knight, which is actually the best move. He didn't take the bishop, which is the best move. After which he would have had to suffer a little bit, like he would have been in a worse position, but it would have been balanced, like worse, but maybe manageable in the long run. Instead, he retreats, offering a trade, and Vidit goes here, and he is completely winning. Like, just a moment of like autopilot, just a bit, Hikaru just kind of retreated, thought, well, I'm not gonna trade, let me go back. f5 and bishop b6, and it's over. White is under unbelievable pressure. Vidit flies in with the knights, puts the king to safety, sacrifices a knight, queen goes to g5, gets the knight back with interest, rips open the white position, and white has 3 pieces on their home squares. Rook d8, king c1, knight f1 discovered check, and in this position, Hikaru resigns. 29 moves. 29 moves, but it was winning from move 18 officially, but it was like the preparation, bishop h3, was ridiculous. If Hikaru had found all the moves, he would have escaped the opening, and he would have been okay. But he goes down with the white pieces to Vidit Gujrati, who was the first man to win in the candidates this year. They drew all their games yesterday, but they were tens games. Unbelievable result from Vidit. And it's too early in the tournament to start fixing the narratives, but I thought before the event that of all the 3 Indians playing, Prague probably had the best shot. Well, Prague played Gukesh in this round, which we're going to look at later, so crazy stuff. Great win for Vidit. Hikaru, the good thing for Hikaru is he's going to have to kind of throw this game in the garbage, and if you're a Hikaru fan, this is actually kind of the best way to lose, because it was a little bit of like a fire, like a flame, and you throw it in the garbage, and you just rely on preparation and form for the rest of the event. But this is hardly the only exciting game. We have an all-Indian teenager matchup. 2 of the youngest participants of the candidates tournament ever. Number 14 and number 16 on planet Earth. Like 5 rating points away each from being the number 1 ranked Indian in the world. This is legendary stuff. This is like if we got this is like Alcaraz Sinner, okay? Like this is the modern day young rivalry. d4, d5, and it is a Catalan with bishop to b4 check. All right? Bishop g2 is coming from Prague, but Prague plays a sideline. He gives up the pawn on c4. And this line is one where white wants a big center and wants the bishop on g2, but he's ready to lose a pawn. So he goes here. We have knight c6, this move, putting pressure on the white center, disallowing this knight from easy maneuvering, kicks out the bishop, takes the center and says, hey, Gukesh, you got to defend your pawn, which he does, a6, but Gukesh is out of his prep. 10 minutes spent, all right? Bishop to e3, b5. You don't play like this with white if you are trying to be solid. You don't do it. Black now just has a clean extra pawn. But white has a big center, white has more space, and white puts the pieces like this, and with his 40-minute time advantage, walks directly into the Gukesh position. Gukesh captures on d5, and Prague goes forward again. Prague goes forward again. Gukesh goes back to e8. 44-minute time advantage from Prague. But he is down 2 pawns. And if you thought 2 pawns was enough, he sacrifices a third! What? So ridiculous. He straight up gave him 3 pawns. He gave him 3 pawns. And his idea is to go knight d4 and just start winning them back one by one. Queen here, bishop f4. This, everything in the black position will collapse. This is crazy, which is why Gukesh thought and went f5. Gukesh spent another 27 minutes on this move. If you talk about a psychological advantage, I have never seen one like this before. 70-minute time advantage from the Golden Boy. I'm talking about Prague. Like, with all the coverage and everything, like the beating Magnus, I mean, these Indian teenagers are rock stars. And Prague right now has the upper hand on Gukesh. He has spent no time in this opening. And he continues to spend no time. Gukesh has to play a little bit faster, so he puts the knight on f6, and he's defending himself with his pieces. Prague is a pawn 2 squares away from queening, a massive Thorman in the white position. He plays queen c2. Finally, Prague thinks for 40 minutes out of prep on his own. He spends 40 minutes thinking, and Gukesh plays c6 and just says, you know what? I have this rock-solid formation. Prague can take one of his pawns back, but now I'm gonna defend. Look at this position. Brick wall. Absolute unit of a wall. Queen e8. Prague plays knight f7. Bishop c8. This type of defense, 8th rank defense, defending your opponent's roaring initiative coming down to your side of the board, this is called Karpovian. Playing like Anatoly Karpov, one of the world champions. 5 out of his 8 pieces are on the back rank. Prague is there. He is on the 1-yard line, to make an NFL reference. But he can't score the touchdown yet. Rook e1. Knight b7. Now the knight is venturing away. It doesn't even want to come here. It wants to come here, or maybe here and here. So what is the game plan? Bishop g5. I mean, Prague, if you're Prague in this position, you literally cannot have more pressure on your opponent. But now you have to do something. Now you have to do something. Now you have to make it count. So he begins making it count by taking on f6 and sacrificing the bishop. Oh my goodness. This is poker. This is like a mix of poker and chess. He is all in. All the chips are in the center of the table. He gives away the bishop. He takes like this. And if you count the material right now, Prague is down a piece for a pawn. And there are threats all over the place. Knight c7, e7, knight to d6. Everything is spinning. Gukesh, best move. Slides back 1 square. Prague in this position now has to give up a knight. That's the only move apparently. Queen g4 check, and the idea is queen d4 sniping the rook on the other side of the board. But instead he goes here, trying to set it up, and knight d8. And all of a sudden, 5 of his 7 pieces are on the 8th rank. 7 out of his 7 pieces are on the last 2 ranks. But when the dust is settling, Prague has nothing. Prague has absolutely nothing left. 5 out of 6 pieces now on the back rank. But there's nothing. Queen d4, the rook slides over a square. Prague tries to continue to make something happen, but he's being pushed back. And Gukesh, in this position, lands 1 strike. And the strike that he lands is rook. That was a bishop move. Rook takes f2. Like this. And Prague resigns. And Gukesh defeats Prague after one of the most absurd defensive games I've ever seen. The bishop went to b4, but if we exclude that move for a second, because the bishop went back, look at how little moves Black made on his opponent's side of the board. Look how few moves. Black made nearly no moves in White's territory past the opening. I understand there's a pawn there. That was early. Look at this. This was a masterclass in dealing with your opponent's momentum. Look at this. He did nothing. He literally just removed the pieces and then made 1 move into his opponent's territory. Rook f2. Unbelievable defensive game from Gukesh. Sublime. Sublime game. He has 1.5. He wins as well. Vidit and Gukesh, the early winners. of the day. I mean, just incredible stuff. Let's pop over to the women's side of things. Nurgul Salimova, I am from Bulgaria. Lei Tingye, the only person that lost in the first round. 7 draws, and she was the only person that lost. She's the former challenger for the World Chess Championship. On the women's side, this one, a Queen's Gambit accepted. Knight f3, knight f6. Captures on c4. This is a main line, and we get a queenless middle game early. I have a feeling Lei Tingye kind of wanted stability. And in this type of game, it is white that has to put the pressure. The players kind of get intermixed, and white tries. You can take the rook, but then the other rook is hanging. But nothing really happens in this one. Pieces slowly come off the board. Black has a little bit of pressure, but those queenside pawns are going to trade off. And not a whole lot is going to happen here as we go to a rook in 3 versus rook on 3 endgame. We have a repetition. Nurgul Salimova, 2 draws to start versus Anna Muzichuk and Lei Tingye. Not so bad. Lei Tingye is on the board. Now, another game. Katerina Lagno versus Humpy Konaru. Both drew in the first game. Both are also legends. I mean, absolute legends. By the way, we see a6, not a Berlin, which is what Vidit played. This is a main line, and now white plays this d3 setup, which is a slight sideline, and a4. We have pawn takes, a trade, and now black takes on a3. It's a big decision, giving up the bishop for the knight. White gets the bishop pair, but black very active in the center of the board. Knight to d4. What an idea. And here, Humpy, with this move, knight d4, playing quite aggressively, but instead of taking, Katerina can consider this move c4, holding together the center. Instead of that, which looked quite promising, she could have claimed some degree of an advantage, but black would have obviously had some compensation. Instead, we have a knight trade in the center of the board, and quite quickly, literally all the pieces fall off. And now it's a queen endgame. And if anybody's going to win this, it's white because of the slightly bad structure. But, and the outside pass pawn. And actually, white does get some pretty decent chances. But Humpy was very accurate with her defense. And the players end up making a draw. And guess what? That was the last draw of the round. Yep. The rest of the game, somebody lost. We had 1 out of 8 decisive results. And today we had 6. So we get the draws out of the way. The rest of the game, somebody won, somebody lost. All right? Yanni Pomnishi, Alireza Firouzja. Yanni Pomnishi, back-to-back World Chess Champion Challenger. Okay? Back-to-back winner of the candidates. Alireza Firouzja, youngest ever player to cross 2,800. Massive expectations on him. I mean, really, I cannot understate. Absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. E4, E5, a Spanish, a Berlin, no Berlin. And remember how in the first game of the day, I told you that there was castles d6. Well, in this game, we have castles and d5. Jan captures on d5, the queen comes out, and this allows white to kind of take some space on the queen side, because that is exactly what black is offering. Knight d2 and a4. This has been played many times. This type of position where white tries to expand over there, black gets active, white defends on c2, and now we've sort of left the known theory. Bishop to g4, we see Alireza in his preparation. Queen a2 from Jan. Both guys know what they're doing. Both guys have studied this. Bishop f3, gf3, queen takes d3. Taking the free pawn, white defends the other pawn, and queen d7. So Alireza at this point, out of his prep, probably spends 6 minutes, comes back, Jan is down a pawn. However, this type of approach by white, all right, giving up the king safety and giving up a pawn. He gives up the king and he gives up the pawn, but what does he get in return? What he gets in return is active rooks. Queen goes to e8 and an attack. This is a freaking creative way to play chess. h4, and Jan is basically saying, you can't cross the middle. The d file is lava. You can't play f5, which is why Alireza brings the knight back and then plays king h8. Look at Yanni Pomnishi. Yanni Pomnishi, middle of the game. My man just went h4, h5, h6. Dude just straight up sent the pawn in. Like, he didn't touch anything else. Everything else was beautiful. It was like a painting. He didn't touch anything else. Alireza now plays g5 because you can't take, because the g file would be open. The queen goes to attack the pawn. The knight jumps into d6 to trade away the knight. Bishop b2 now. The engine here is giving black an edge. Alireza has an advantage. And he plays knight f5. And he plays knight h4 check. He plants the knight. Look up. Can we just look at that knight's journey? Knight c8, knight d6, Knight f5, knight h4. It went from here to here. It had multiple stops. It had a really terrible flight itinerary, but it paid like $8 for the tickets. King f1, f5. Ali Reza is better. Ali Reza is beating Nepo with black, but the position is very murky, very unpleasant. Knight to g3. This is another free pawn, by the way, and he takes it. Ali Reza is now up 2 pawns. Meanwhile, Jan is still firing away, and when this pawn goes away, this is going to get really, really unpleasant. Now, f4, giving up the knight, but attacking White's knight. Who is weaker? The knight goes into the center. That might have been a bad decision by Ali Reza, by the way. Might have been better to control those pieces rather than allowing the knight in. Knight a5. Now Jan plays this crazy move. What is happening? Queen goes here. I beg your pardon? What? Why did he abandon the bishop? It would have been better to go g4. If bishop takes g4, knight h2 gets the bishop. That would have been better. Instead, Ali Reza gives up the bishop completely. And Ali Reza, as you can see from the time, 35 minutes on the clock here. He clearly didn't like something about the move knight a5, so he went here, and all of a sudden, he spent 17 minutes, and he's down to 4. Gives up the bishop, goes queen to h6. Jan plays bishop f7, setting up various very nasty intentions over here, and also walks the king into the center of the board. And that, my friends, is the last that Jan Nepomniachtchi's king ever felt unsafe in this game again, because he was surrounded by the love of his pieces, the defense of his pieces, and he started eating. And his king walked to d3. And that is how a gangster plays chess. And Jan Nepomniachtchi is the king of the candidates. Jan Nepomniachtchi's king is the king of this game. c4. Ali Reza goes completely all in, nearly loses on time. Ali Reza made this move. He had 9 seconds to make one move. He had like 10 seconds to make 3 moves, by the way. He gets to his 40th move, a 40th move to get more time, but he's just down a rook. And a couple of moves later, he resigned. And Jan Nepomniachtchi goes right back to where he started in 2022. This man just won again. He is also in first place, along with Gukesh and Vidit. Insanity. Insanity. Every game today had a winner. This is Alexandra Goryachkina, whose name also gets cut off on the screen. Oh my goodness. D4, D5 versus Anna Muzichuk. We have an exchange Slav, which is not something that you're used to seeing in a game at like the candidates, let's say. Bishop f4. This is normally very, very boring stuff. I mean, the position is symmetrical. But White plays knight e5. Very edgy move. Knight to e5. All right, we have knight takes, pawn takes. And here, a gambit. e4. That is a complete giveaway of a pawn. Bishop b5, and then she takes on d7 and plays knight to a4, a seemingly completely innocuous line. But Muzichuk clearly uncomfortable. Overthinks it, thinks for 22 minutes in this position. But everything looks playable. Now, you can't play b5 because it's a fork. You can't play king c7 either, because after rook c1, you're forced into a corner and you're going to lose. So it's really unpleasant. She plays rook b8. But somehow, there are still many, many, many threats and unpleasant things in this position. And Muzichuk just never gets comfortable. She tries to give checks. White plays bishop d2. She brings the bishop back. The bishop gets kicked out. But Black can't castle. Look, try. You can't. Why can you not? Because the king moved. King moved. You can't castle anymore. So the king is sort of dancing in the center of the board. And I got news for you. The king never makes it out. b5, knight b6. She tries to break out. But all of a sudden, White just jumps the knight in. Rook c7. And that's it. Knight takes e7. Why is that winning? Because whatever takes there, the bishop will snipe you from the other side of the board. And Alexandra Goryachkina on the board as well in the women's candidates. Wins a very, very, very nice game. From start to finish, there was a lot of pressure on the black position. And it somehow seemed like this gambit literally just gave up a pawn and forced Black's king into the center of the board. That's it. I mean, Black was up a pawn the whole game. Literally. If you count the pawns, White has 6 and Black has 7. But because Black had no way to castle, the material didn't matter. And as we got deeper and deeper into the game, White just had more. White just won this game straight up down a pawn. It was a very impressive victory. Now, Tanong Yi versus Vaishali Ramesh Babu. Tanong Yi, the only winner of day 1. She beat Lei Tingye. And this time we have a Jobava London. I mean, you talk about showing up to the candidates with an edgy chess opening. This is a blitz opening at the highest level, but it's an imbalanced game. We have knight c6, we have bishop d3, and Tanong is basically just going to put a knight on e5 and see what's up. She's just going to build up her position in a way that she's going to attack the center. All right, bishop d6, good. Bishopless middle game. Two players that hate bishops. a3, solid. Right, nobody's going to b4. Knight a2. Wow. The idea of knight a2 is to potentially put the knight there, but also to maybe put the knight where the queen is, and then jump into the position. Rook c8, c3. Just very solid game. Very solid. Vaishali puts the knight in the center. The queen slides out of the way. The knight goes to b4, and the knight goes to d3. It's exactly what you want. It's this beautiful, harmonious game. Black trying to do stuff over here. White trying to put something into the center. And she does, and I told you this is what she's going to do. f3. Knight back to d6. Knight f4. Okay. I mean, is there something brewing? I don't think there's an attack brewing. Okay, white is kind of trying, but certainly nothing is going to happen, right? I don't see any way to... What is Tanong doing? I mean, is she just overconfident from the previous game? What? Knight b5? Vaishali is... But here's a better question. What is Vaishali doing? Her knights are not going to eat rocks. Horses don't eat rocks, right? I don't think they do. But, Queen h4, knight h5, and Tanong is just a locomotive, just completely unleashed. She's going down the g-file. Rook is on g2. Knight is on f4. Pawn is on e5. Knight to f6. Absolutely gangster final move. Disconnecting everything, that's mate, and if you take, it goes from bad to worse. The other knight jumps in. The king has to go to the g-file, and when it does, I take, and then I take like this, and I win both rooks. An absolute avalanche. Tanong rendered black's position completely useless. Like, a fantastic game, and she has 2 wins out of 2 games. She's 2-0. What a game this was. I mean, this was like smooth. This was smooth like butter. She set up in a way that black had absolutely nothing. There was nothing that black could do against white's setup. White played it slowly, and when it came time, went so quick and so fast, it was done. Like a boxer, just boom, boom. It was over. 2 for 2, last game of the day. Fabiano Caruana, after drawing yesterday versus Hikaru, Nijata Basov, after drawing yesterday versus Jan Nepomniachtchi, shows up, plays a Sicilian defense, and against Fabiano's Salimova, he plays e5. That's crazy. I mean, you talk about surprising a guy in a Sicilian, e5 is one of the least popular moves in that position. You can play d6, e6, g6, so many things. E5 is bananas. And Fabiano, what he does in this game, I mean, look at this. This is wild stuff. Some of you may be wondering, by the way, why you can't take and take. It's because black would play queen d4. That's why. So white can't just win the pawn. Black goes here, d3, and Fabi here just says, you know what? Just play chess. Just play chess, h3. And when you attack me, since you're not jumping, right, you're not going to get out of the way, I'm going to take. Takes. Knight h4. So the idea by white is to put a bunch of pawns on light squares. He traded a light square bishop, so he gets the pieces out of the way. Knight h4. The idea of knight h4 quite straightforward. f4 in the future, queen f3, light squares. White is going to play on the light squares. Abasov plays rook e8. Queen f3, g6. Okay, that's a big decision. g6, you can't go to f5. Bishop g5 from Fabiano. And queen e3. So Fabi taking control of the dark squares and the light squares in this position. Abasov plays knight h5. All right, Fabi has to trade the bishop, and he brings the knight back to f3. And essentially what Fabi is saying in this position is, the guy that controls the pawn breaks has the advantage. Black's got a very solid formation, but black is never going to play f5. For example, like Fabi went here, black is never going to go here because it just opens up possibilities for white. This is a horrible trade. So the guy that controls the pawn breaks has the advantage. Now Abasov plays b5 here after spending 8 minutes, and that weakens his c5 pawn. So now Fabiano, this is so instructive what Fabi does here. He brings one knight back, he brings two knights back, and sometimes in life you gotta take a step back to go 2 steps forwards. Well, Fabiano takes 2 steps back. So that means, by the law of mathematics, which I just invented, means he's gonna go 4 steps forwards, f4. I told you about this move a long time ago. Remember a long time ago I said knight h4, preparing various f-pawn advancements. Well, it took Fabiano a little while to figure out and bide his time, but there it is. All right, now we trade, and he's got a line of attack. All right, this game has been smooth sailing so far from Fabi. He's now gonna have to deal with the counterplay. Look at this idea, by the way, b4. What an idea. The point is to split up the pawns so that after the trade, these guys are frozen. You can't take, because the queen would be walking away from the defense of the king. e5 is vicious. Smacked here, bad news. That's why Abasov tries to get rid of his weakness. But pawn takes. And Abasov here should probably take the pawn back fast. He didn't like something. I think he didn't like the queen getting into b6, which is why he does this. But Fabi now just doesn't give up the pawn. That was a massive decision from Abasov. e5. Fabi continuing to hammer away in the center of the board. You may be wondering why there was no capture, because after take, queen e3, too many weaknesses. Queen d6, knight e4, and you lose. So f5, Abasov says, I don't want to trade. Fabiano says, you're going to trade the pieces because I'm up a pawn. I need to get to my pawn. But Abasov is defending himself very well. Rook a8, knight b3. Now Abasov goes nuts. He starts counterattacking with the pawns in front of his king, but it turns out to be the best moves. Rook f2, giving up the pawn on c4, but getting the pawn back on f5. It's a very tense game. But Abasov makes a fatal mistake. What he should have done is he should have played queen to e6. And after rook f6, he should have just stepped forward. But he panics a little bit, and he takes the knight, thinking he's winning a pawn back. But after rook f1, it's over. You cannot stop rook f7 check. Maybe Abasov thought somehow he was in time, but this is a check. If it wasn't a check, like if the position was this, yeah, rook a1 is a great move because you're going to trade. But because rook f1 comes with a check, it all falls apart. And Fabiano Caruana wins his first game of the candidates. Fabiano Caruana, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Gukesh, and Vidit are tied for first with 1.5 points. These are your final standings on both sides. Tanong, everybody's on the board. On the open side, we got 4 guys that won and we got 4 guys that lost. All right, the women's side, we have 2 winners in this round, and one of them is a double winner from round 1. She's at 2 points, and the only person even close to her is Alexandra Goryachkina, nearly a 1-point lead there already. Round number 3 is tomorrow. Incredible matchups await. I'm having a great time. Get a course for 33% off while you can. Get out of here.